Welcome back to the Menopause Movement podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Gordon. So happy to have you here. And if you're watching on YouTube or on my website, thanks for being a part of the Menopause Movement. Today, we welcome Annabel Wilson to the podcast. So, Annabel was inspired to find a practical, modern antidote to universal disconnection, suffering, and the overall lack of well being across societies. She created the profit for purpose startup Living Ashram. Now, its purpose is to provide a clear path to whole human well being by removing the guesswork, overwhelm, and wasted effort from the quest for positive mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. The company seamlessly interweaves neuroscience, psychology, physiology, mindfulness, spirituality, and multiple healing modalities using evidence-based techniques to empower users to create substantive and sustainable positive shifts in their well-being and their lives. The information is delivered through their app, workshops, guided practice, and data analytics. Their 360 ethical business model means that 25% of all profits are allocated to fund targeted programs at their charity partners to enable adults and children to break free from the cycle of abuse and live healthy, independent lives. Annabel is a self-defined global nomad. She grew up and worked across Asia, Europe, Central America, and the USA. She has a Bachelor of Arts from the UC Berkeley and an MBA from London Business School. She discovered her purpose in 2015 and has been on a magically expansive journey of seeking, shifting, and evolution ever since. In our modern society, we see a fear of loss of youth, of relevancy, of sexuality and sensuality as we age. However, we can continue to blaze our own path and continue to create a rich, abundant, joyfully juicy, spark-filled life, regardless of age. And we spent some time speaking about this on the podcast. It was really great to have Annabel, and I can't wait to have her back. We really did go into quite a few different topics that we both are really passionate about. During the podcast, we talk about the definition of breakthrough and Annabel's major breakthrough in 2015, the importance of taking a step back to focus on our breath and the benefits that we get from that, and how beliefs shape our reality, and why it's important to examine every single belief we have in order to be free. We talk about spiritual longing. We talk about guilt and shame and its consequences. We talk about forgiveness and how it's necessary to forgive to get past all those hurts that happened to us. Now, stay to the end to find out a powerful method to discover your core values. And at the end of the episode, make sure you visit drmichellegordon.com/podcasts, where you can find the show notes, plus the links to the books and resources mentioned in the episode. And we talked about a lot of books today. Be sure to check the show notes for a discount code also to livingashram.com so that you can use this well-being application to level up your life now. And if you enjoy the episode, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so you're always the first to know when each episode is released. And you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, at Stitcher or Spotify. And thanks for all of the 5-star reviews. If you haven't left a review yet, please take the time to review the podcast. This helps more women to find it and get the help they need during the disruption of menopause. No one should have to go through it alone. You're not alone in your menopause. I'm here to tell you that. And thanks so much for being a part of the menopause movement. And now let's get to Annabel. This is going to be great. This is a great episode. I'm so excited. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having me. Yes.
Yeah. Where are you? Where do you live?
I'm in London, so it's beautiful summer day today. I just came back from a walk. The only bad thing is the allergies, so that's not fabulous for the hay fever, but it's fine with the sprays and the eye drops. It's all good. We're just happy to see the sunshine and blue skies.
Right, you don't get much sunshine there, right?
It's
Yeah.
been all right this May. We've had hail for every single May I've been here in the last 20 years, and sunshine,
Wow.
4 seasons in one day.
Let's talk about your app. What led you to creating an app? It's a lifestyle app, right?
It's a well-being app, and it takes a very
Okay.
root level up, whole human approach to health and well-being. And
Okay.
the app it's a long story, which I'll summarize about how the app came into creation. And the company, Living Ashram, really, the name kind of says it all. An ashram is traditionally a place of seeking, evolution, of wisdom, of knowledge, of answers. And I felt blessed and fortunate enough to have been able to go all around the world as a product of reaching a stage in my life where really it was undeniable that a breakthrough, either we have choices sometimes in life where we can take the situation we're in and really learn and grow from it and really do some really deep inner work, really look at what we've been doing, what serves us, what's healthy, what's not healthy. Or we can bury everything under, distract ourselves, and continue as we were. And I reached the stage in my life about 5 years ago where I decided it was really, really time. I had received all the messages, and it was time I really understood. I really wanted to understand what was driving my behavior, my patterns of behavior. And I really wanted to reach the stage where I could become the healthiest version of myself. So I was fortunate enough to have the right leaders and guides. I actually had my breakthrough at Esalen. But
At
here's
what?
the part. At Esalen in Big
I don't know what
Sur.
that is.
It was
Hmm.
founded by, it's a beautiful story. It's in Big Sur, which is a beautiful, beautiful part
Mm-hmm.
of Northern
It's beautiful there.
California.
Love it.
And it was founded by two ex-Stanford graduates who had been to the East, had been to India, and had done all the
Mm.
seeking there, and really wanted to bring to the West all the different philosophies. So I think the greatest philosophers, seekers, teachers, everything from yoga to various different healing modalities, have psychiatry, psychology, have all taught there at some stage. So
Mm.
it's quite an amaze. Everyone has their own experience there, and there's so much on offer. And I just happened to have the right teacher, the right guide. But that
Well, we have
brought,
something like that up here. It's called the Omega Institute. Have
yes,
you heard of the
Omega and
Omega
Kripalu.
Institute? Yeah.
Yes, I have. That's
Yeah, in Rye.
definitely, yes.
Not Rye,
I
in Rhinebeck.
Rhinebeck, yes.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's closed now because we're in the pandemic, but they're going to start back up next year.
I think they're
Yeah.
quite similar in intention and
Yeah.
ethos. But going back to the journey towards the app,
Mm-hmm.
the breakthrough really helped me understand what my purpose was, why I was here, and what brought fulfillment to my life. And the app was the birth of all of that. It was the second stage of it. And Living Ashram was the concept of bringing that seeking, that knowledge, that evolution, because not everyone has the awareness, the time, the resources to go on this long journey somewhere. And as we all know, the real work always starts when you come home, when you're surrounded by the hubris of day-to-day life, in your relationships, at work,
Yeah.
with children, surrounded by everything, all the triggers that would normally trigger you. And we wanted to have something that was accessible all the time, where cost wasn't a factor, where you could have the most impactful practices that pull, and we draw from our collective experience. It's decades of experience and research and practice across neuroscience, psychology, physiology, mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
spirituality, and multiple healing modalities. So we're not wedded to one way of doing things. We're so open-minded. We're such big collaborators. We're constantly looking at everything from neuroscience studies and the latest breakthroughs there to different healing modalities and energy psychology and energy work. So we bring it all together in a really organic way that also fully respects that all of our users are time sensitive. So they don't have time to sit for 60 minutes and do an incredibly deep practice every single day. So we've distilled it down to what are the practices that we're all completely science and evidence based, which ones have proven health benefits, how can we deliver this in a way that can slot easily into people's lives, how can we do it in a really comprehensive way that meets their mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual needs. And that's our app in essence. Half of it is a well-being app. So it's a guided, half of it is a guided well-being program. So you have a series of very condensed practices there, ranging from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. And the other half, and one of the practices, it's called Deeds of Appreciation. And while we have conscious breathing on there because there's such a multitude of health benefits for that, and as little as 1 minute of regular conscious breathing provides so many health benefits,
calm
like
down
boosting.
It'll calm down the
cortisol. Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. The adrenals. It lowers our cortisol levels. It alleviates symptoms of depression, of anxiety, improves our immune response, decreases symptoms of PTSD and ADD. Like when you look into all the health benefits, and it's not something you need to do in a dedicated eyes closed practice. You can do it when you're working at your computer. You can do it when you're waiting in a line or a queue. You can do it while you're waiting on the phone. You can do it while you're driving around. So it's something that's easily incorporated, and it's our breath. No one can take that away from us. We can use it anytime. That's the beauty of that practice. And
so
we also have a resource hub part of it where it's not
before
us.
we go there,
yes.
let's just back up for a minute. I want to talk for a second about purpose, because you said that, it took you 5 years to kind of get to the place where you were able to find your purpose. And, I get that because I've recently decided to leave medicine to pursue my more passion project here, which is the menopause movement. And one of the litmus tests that I use when it comes to doing something now is, does it make my heart sing? And
that's beautiful.
So what I want to know from you is, how did you get there? What happened for you as you moved into, because the app is the app and we can talk about that all day long, but what we can't talk about is how to really get to, we spend a lot of time talking about midlife meaning, midlife purpose, things like that. We're never over the hill. We have, anybody can reinvent themselves at any time. It isn't just for Madonna, right? Or Lady Gaga.
Definitely not. We can reinvent ourselves at any stage in our lives, no matter what stage. And I'm just going to clarify that point. It actually took me 41 years to find my purpose.
Okay.
And it took me,
fair enough.
I've now been, and when I had my breakthrough, that's when everything fell into place, when I knew what my purpose was, right at that moment of the breakthrough. It took 5 years, or not quite 5 years, about 3 years, to finally arrive at what that looked like. We tried doing a few different things, but to get to this stage, it took 5 years. But
so breakthrough. So to me, breakthrough has always been getting out of my own way and getting out of my head, and starting to take action. So what does breakthrough mean to you?
I'm calling it breakthrough so I don't freak anyone out by saying awakening, but that's essentially an interchangeable word for me. What does that mean to me? It was actually the first time where I felt fully present and fully connected with myself. And I don't mean that in a shallow way. I meant everything, the full channel was open. And that's when I felt fully connected to myself, why I was here in this world. And it was almost like my soul and my heart cracked right open. And I knew without a question of a doubt why I was here and what purpose I was here to serve. And I've never looked back. That has never been in question along all the bumps and the ups and downs along the way. That was what I mean by breakthrough. And I guess the best way I can describe it would be the highest high out of everything that you've ever felt, all at the same moment. The light comes back into your eyes. And it wasn't for me. I saw the other people who were in my group and workshop at the time. We're all together for 2 weeks, and everything changes. When the light inside you changes, when your mindset changes, when you reach that moment of awakening or breakthrough, when you break through. I'll put that into more concrete instead of abstract terms. I think breakthrough is best described when we break through these really long held beliefs that are buried so deep in our subconscious that we're not even aware they're there. They don't even belong to us. Most of us have been programmed since childhood and by society along our way into adulthood and way into adulthood. We're holding all these beliefs and they're not even us. We're living a life that maybe doesn't fulfill us or bring us joy in the way that's really aligned with what our closest values and what our deepest soul's desires are. So I guess that was essentially that breakthrough, punching through all of those layers and seeing the answer and the truth of what really is you.
It's interesting because when we start to really examine our beliefs, I mean, there's huge benefits to examining our beliefs. And, I tell this story pretty frequently about how I formed a belief when I was 5. And that belief was that I couldn't make money unless I was a doctor. And that subconscious programming led me to start medical school at 31. All right. So it was like almost like a second career. Yeah. And I was like, I can't make money unless I'm a doctor. I can't make money. And that came from something my mom said when I was 5 years old. And, she had two, a brother-in-law and a brother who were doctors. And she made some comment like, they're so rich. And so my 5-year-old mind took that in and said, oh, I have to be a doctor if I want to be rich. And
how did you break through that? How did you break out of that mindset?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing, it was a guided meditation that we did with James Wedmore, actually. We did this guided meditation, and it's like he asked the question, why haven't you made money in your business yet? And then I went back to that place where I realized that. And so then, I did some work and busted that belief and said, well, that's not true. It's absolutely not true. I mean, I can make money doing anything I want if I set my mind to it. And so, and so here we are, and now we have the menopause movement. We're helping to transform women's lives and, women in menopause and helping them to like see everything differently. And so that's exactly what we want to do. And I think your app is probably something that is complementary to that as we move through the program. But the other question I wanted to ask you is, what was your spiritual practice before your breakthrough, and what is your spiritual practice now?
Believe it or not, I used to want to be a nun when I was, which everyone just thinks is ridiculous when I was.
No, it's not. You
wanted
Catholic?
to be a nun as a life aspiration in the early years of my life.
Sure.
But I always had.
Wait. You were raised Catholic?
In the early years.
Right. And you went to Catholic school, right?
No, I didn't go to Catholic school.
You didn't go to Catholic school. Okay.
No,
but you were raised Catholic. Because I went to Catholic school for a couple of years. And of course I wanted to be a nun. I mean, except for those nuns who rapped us on the knuckles. Those weren't nice nuns.
And there was also, of course, Sound of Music. That gave a romanticized version of it. And so there was, in terms of spiritual practice, I always believed in a higher power. I always believed in God. But I was one of those weirdos who would be equally comfortable in a church as in a temple, basically any holy place. It was more of the spiritual connection. I didn't have the words and the vocabulary as a child and as a young person growing up, but I always felt that deep, deep sense of connection and that longing. I remember standing wherever we happened to be, traveling all around the world and standing and looking up long after the rest of my family had gone to bed, looking out at the lights in the city, and this incredible longing, which I didn't realize was the separation that I had felt. I didn't have the words. I didn't have that knowledge. I was a child.
Yeah.
It took me many years to understand what that feeling was. So in terms of, yes, I'd practiced yoga for many years, decades, and I always had I felt a very open relationship with God, with source, with the universe, whatever word people want to use. But I've also had the belief that, yes, it's one God, many different names, but it's ultimately the same, and deep respect for the multiple different religions and beliefs and faiths that are out there. But so I've always been a spiritual person. I wouldn't necessarily say so much religious, but spiritual. That channel was open, but then became clouded over the years. You get distracted. You get your degrees, you have life, you have a family, you have children, you have partners, you have businesses. So things and I'm so blessed and so grateful to have found my way back to this place.
So you found your way back to a spiritual practice. And, one of the things I like to say is that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And there's plenty of texts that help us to see that. And one of the ones I'm working through right now is this one. Have you worked through this one?
Yes.
This is the the Course in Miracles book. It's heady. That's very heady, but I'm doing the exercises every day, and it's starting to kind of gel with the stuff I've learned from, Self-Realization Fellowship and, having been raised Catholic and then I went into some, like kind of conservative Christian evangelical type when I was younger. And then I kind of rejected it all for a long time, and I was an atheist. And then I moved on and started having a spiritual practice again after many years, just saying, oh, and it was when I read Autobiography of a Yogi is when everything changed for me. But I think that our goal here, and, if you're somebody who doesn't believe in spirituality, then, maybe this episode isn't for you. But I think the goal of us when we come here is to kind of stop being separated and understand that we're not separate from our source.
That journey, we talk about the journey home, and it depends the audience I'm speaking to, but the real journey home is to self and source, or with people who are not spiritual or not yet ready, which is, there's nothing wrong. They're just not there yet.
They're not, yeah.
I talk about it's the journey home to the healthiest version of yourself, which is, of course, a fully connected self that is connected not just to yourself, but the world beyond that, whatever that means to people. So that's kind of a more palatable or acceptable way that a lot of people come to this. But what I love, spirituality is such a wide thing, and there's so many different modalities, and some teachers like to linger a little bit more in the suffering and that phase. And God knows I've gone through enough dark nights of the soul and all of the deep, deep, deep shadow work, which is, I think, essential in reaching a certain place. But when people are ready and when they're guided, and definitely done in conjunction with a very, very well qualified therapist, because that opens up all kinds of trauma and windows that really needs to be carefully guided. So, but where I really think the lesson is, and the joy, that return to joy, that return to living our most vibrant, full, juicy, abundant lives, that's where we're meant to be. We're not here to suffer. We're here to be in joy, to live abundant lives, to be fully connected to ourselves. We're not here to live in guilt and shame.
Right
and it's
on.
okay to be vulnerable. We're not here to, you were raised Catholic. We're not here to be in guilt and shame. And, on top of that, I have my Asian background with traditional, not blaming anyone. I'm just saying this is the culture of, you will be a filial pious, you will be a good performer, a good achiever, all of these things. You will be a good individual. So there's all of these layers, but ultimately freedom is where, why I'm in this, why this is very much a mission motivated business, and this is a calling in life. It's really to empower people to take back control of why they're here, to give them awareness, to guide them on the journey home. We're all at different steps of the journey, and what that journey home looks different for everyone. But that return to joy, that complete forgiveness of self, it's unbelievable how much we don't forgive ourselves, and how much we're holding ourselves to these almost impossibly high standards of perfection. I still do it to some aspects, and it's always a realization when, oh, why am I giving myself such a hard time on that, when we can actually, let's soften into ourselves. Let's really listen. Let's really listen to what's really important to us and put our energy there. And let's keep our focus on, no, we're not. Of course, it's not possible to be happy and fully present 100% of the time. We're not Buddha. I mean, I'm not there yet. It's still a process. But let's keep our focus on abundance, on joy, on love, on grace, on compassion. Yes, there are dark days, and let's sit with that and let's allow that as well. But I wish collectively for humanity that we would stop beating ourselves up, that we would forgive ourselves, and in forgiving ourselves, learn to forgive others, and just dropping all the anger, the grudges, the fear, facing them, and really learning through them to evolve. This is my wish and my deepest desire for everyone.
There's a couple things I want to say. One of the things that I like to tell everybody who's in my program is that suffering is optional. Suffering's optional in menopause. Suffering is optional in life, because nothing has meaning except for that we apply. And I love that. And that is very hard for people. But when you start to really unpack all the beliefs that you grew up with and start to understand that every, the only like real, there's a few laws in the universe, right? Like we know that at least on the earth, when you drop something, it's going to fall at 9.8 meters per second squared. That's a law. And it's always true, right? It might be a little bit different at the equator, but it's always true. But it's not always true that, the hate, say, for example, the hate that Westboro Baptist Church teaches their children, that God hates fags. That's not always true. That's a belief. Right. And so what I like to tell
that
people is,
hurts when I hear that.
I know
It
hurts.
actually
It's bad,
physically
but
hurts.
right.
It hits
but
right
remember,
here in the heart.
But these children are being programmed that way. And one of the things that, I grew up in a very, 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 it was the 60s and the 70s when I was growing up. And it was, we're still very racist in this country. And we're trying to fix that, but it's not easy. And I had to go back and look at all the beliefs that came from my parents about race and kind of confront the institutional racism that I grew up with and forgive myself for that, which was hard. And just like, oh my God, and thinking that I wasn't racist, but I was, and having to confront that was hard. But I was, able to kind of look at that. And, while I'll never experience, what happens with another race, at least I can have more compassion now. And I actually see when I'm making mistakes. and where I made mistakes in the past. And so I'm able to have that conversation. So I wanted to mention, you've probably read The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And if you haven't,
funny, you're the second person that's mentioned that book to me. I'll take that as a sign, and I haven't read it, but the concepts.
So what I love about that book is that he talks about being open and being closed. And so when you have to experience the darkness, the thing to do is to feel it and let it come through you and never close. And he says it, and he's, he tells you what to do, but not how to do it. And so it's in that book, I had to read it. I've probably read that book like 7 times now in terms of, because he talks about enlightenment in a way that makes sense, about a fortress that you build around yourself. But he also says, never close. And when you have the anger, when you have the pain, when you have it, just let it come through you. And so for me, I see that as just like leaving the heart chakra open and feeling things, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. And, I react a lot too. And, we're all works in progress, but that's a book that I try to recommend to people. And the other thing is when it comes to forgiveness, self-forgiveness, I love one of the exercises in Gabby Bernstein's May Cause Miracles, which is, I forgive myself for thinking that thought. I forgive myself for thinking that thought. Because at the end of the day, we're our own worst critics. And we are always going to be, and we're always going to be pushing back at ourselves. I'm too fat. I'm ugly. I should never have said that to that person. I should never have taken that action. Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that. I should, all those things that we, for whatever reason, it's a human thing that we have this voice that is bad, talks bad to us.
Our inner critic, it serves a very distinct function. It's a protector of our ego. It serves so many functions, and we can learn to work with it because it will never, ever go away, but we can definitely learn to have a healthier relationship with it. It's funny that you bring up forgiveness, because one of the core practices on our app is a forgiveness and gratitude practice, exactly because it goes so deep, and it's one of the core places where we can release and move. And what people don't realize is what many people don't realize is when we hold on to past hurt and pain, it actually, our bodies cannot distinguish the difference between when we're just recalling something, a memory, and when it's happening real time. So we're just literally inflicting more layers.
That's
and
why
we're feeling it
visualization
physiologically.
works.
It does.
Yeah.
And
that's why
the gratitude coupled with the gratitude at the end, because some people, gratitude practice is beautiful, but you know what? Not all of us are capable all the time of starting there. So let's face what it is that we're holding. Let's work through it. Let's really listen to it. Sometimes giving it a voice, hearing it, that's all we wanted in the first place. We all want to be seen and heard. this
Right.
practice that we have leads, and not just ours, there's other forgiveness and gratitude practices out there, but it goes deep, and it has us look at what the lesson was. What is the lesson? What was the gift in all of
So
that?
you
We can
take them
find
through a
gift in
journey.
everything. It's definitely a journey,
Yeah.
but done in a very gentle, accessible way as well. And a journey back to gratitude and to blessings. So it's a big, I think, in addition to the forgiveness, looking at, I would love to talk a little bit about, I feel the menopause movement. I have 4 birthdays before 50. So I'm turning 47 next at the end
Uh-huh.
of the year. And I think as women, this weighs a little bit more on us, because a man can have children all the way until, they stop producing sperm, basically. Let's
But
just
they produce
call a
sperm their
spade
whole
a spade.
lives.
Exactly. So they can start
Yeah.
literally have children. They can keep being, it's okay for them to physically okay for them to keep literally
Mm-hmm.
propagating and being sexual and active until their deathbed. Whereas
Yeah.
for women, we have different stages. And as we start looking at 50 and beyond, which is very relevant to the people the community of these gorgeous women that you're helping, we start having these fears, and it's
Yeah.
deeply tied so deeply to how do we identify ourselves. So we start fearing, for some of us, maybe we start fearing the loss of youth, of beauty, of relevancy. What about our
Well, there's more
sensuality?
to it than that. It's
Mhm.
not just that. This audience and the women who come into the program,
Yeah.
they have these. They don't recognize themselves anymore. Menopause has changed who they are, and it's not just the act of menopause, but it's the way that they are interacting with their lives, and the fact that there's a loss of purpose in a lot of them.
And
And so we help
helplessness.
them. It's
Hmm.
there's some helplessness, but it's more like I feel like an alien has beamed down and taken control of my body. I don't know
Hmm.
where these moods are coming from. I feel like managing menopause is a full-time job. These are things that women say to me. And
Hmm.
what we do in the menopause movement is we help them to see their
Hmm.
purpose. I mean, we
Hmm.
talk all about like what's happening and how the medical establishment definitely wants you to think that you're having a medical problem, and it's not a medical problem.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need medication,
Right.
and so we kind of work on that, and then we move into how to support it through movement and eating and the way we think. And so those are
Yeah.
the MENO-Mate pillars. And so when somebody becomes a MENO-Mate, they get the MENO-Mate. We teach them science, we teach them the MENO-Mate way of eating, the MENO-Mate way of moving, and the MENO-Mate way of thinking. And then we move them
Those
on.
core pillars that you just talked about, that would
Yeah.
serve anyone at any stage of life, seriously. But in
Yeah.
terms of healthy movement, healthy nutrition, healthy mindset, that's
Yeah.
with us. But I think there's more immediate urgency and call for it when we reach a stage in our lives when, as you say, we feel like an alien has taken over our body.
Yeah.
And who wants that? I mean, not only are we moving into what's traditionally known as, I don't even want to use this term or this piece of vocabulary because it's
Mm.
so foul, but the crone stage, you move from maiden to full womanhood to crone.
Right.
That makes me think of some witch in Macbeth with the hook nose and the hairy wart, and that's not what
The
women
lady,
are.
the witch from Snow White, right?
Yes. And that's not what
Yeah.
women are. What about softening into our experience and our grace and our position as, from all of that wisdom, as leaders, as guides?
Mm.
And really, and who said we needed to lose? This is a big thing for many women as well. You start to feel like you can't be attractive or sensual or sexual anymore, not
Mhm.
just because of what's happening to your body, all the changes, the hot
Yeah.
flashes, the
Well, it's not
sweating.
just that. I mean, some women actually
Mhm.
lose libido because of loss of
Yes,
hormones.
I
And
understand.
we actually have, we have a sexual health series here on the podcast, and I've
Mhm,
met with Julia Lally a couple of times. And
mhm.
and so she's the pleasure witch. And so we talk a bit about,
Great
the first one,
name. Talk about
no,
witches.
yeah, no, it was great. It was really, the
Mhm,
first one was just about, sexuality. And then the second one was like increasing your pleasure using the jade egg, and, how it got a bad rap, and those sorts of things.
mhm.
So those are a couple of really interesting podcasts that we put together.
Well,
Uh,
pleasure, exactly
yeah.
that. Why is there a belief that we need to lose pleasure or vibrancy as we age as women. The men certainly don't have that
They
belief
don't.
about themselves. And why do we keep buying as women into this ancient belief system that's not even our own? And I think the more of us that can step up and break through that and live life on our own terms, and really do that through, we can talk through some tools and things like that in
Mm-hmm.
terms of mindset. I mean, nutrition and physical movement is incredibly key, and that's what we add in our information that we provide people
Mm-hmm.
as well. But in terms of mindset, that is the biggest change that
Yeah.
we can make on our own independently.
That's true, and I mean, mindset is a hard concept to teach natively, and so we bring it up in a different way. But our beliefs shape our reality. We start with
Yeah,
that, and
definitely.
what I love to do is have them really like examine every belief they have, and
Yeah.
one of the beliefs that we are bombarded with from our childhood is that men are more important than women,
Oh my
and that
goodness.
the right? One of the ahas I had on one of the podcasts I was doing, I don't know who it was with, but I actually said, I looked at everything. I have a male God. I had a male view of myself because everything was about men. And so I saw myself as male. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, well, I'm not male anymore. I can't see myself as male because
Mhm.
I didn't have, there's not a society, we don't have a societal norm where it's okay to be female. And almost every single podcast I bring up, the patriarchy. But if
Mhm.
we're going to be women in this society and take back our power, one of the things we have to do is acknowledge the fact that we were raised thinking, in this whole thing that men are more important. And it's been
Definitely.
very
More
difficult.
important, more capable, more hardworking, just more in
Hmm.
general. I could bump up a lot in that in business world. And
Yeah.
if you think about my business world, I was on a mental health panel with traditional allopathic doctors, neuroscientists, immunologists from Harvard and Stanford. And here I am. Yes, I embrace all of that, but I also embrace complementary medicine, alternative healing therapies, very open, because it's not an either or, it's complementary. It's complementary for a reason. So science and evidence
Yeah.
based with all of this. And it takes real courage and self-belief, which we can all access, to stand up in places like that where it's not always cozy, where it's not always loving, and it's certainly not always heart-led. It's a lot ego-led with a string of titles and degrees after, and to really stand in our full power and to stand in that space and speak our truth, not in
Yeah.
an angry way, in a calm way, but from a place of authenticity and integrity. I think, and honestly, I have so much respect for women as I get older, more and more respect every day, even. And the role that we play, we're space holders. I love men too, so please, this is not a man bashing
Yeah,
thing.
no, I don't bash the men. I mean, there are plenty of men who believe in the egalitarian way of doing things, and there are lots of great men out there. There are lots of shitty men out there,
But the
right? So, but
system
there's a lot
and
of
the
shitty women out
brainwashing.
there, right? What I like to say is that we as women have had the boot of the man on our neck for a long, long time. And it goes back to, as a matter of fact, and this is a book that I mention a lot on the podcast. It's called The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And it is a great book that I actually learned about from Ani DeFranco, of all people, who is a folk singer.
Mhm.
And it just is a history of language and religion and how all of the gods were female until we started having written language. We started using the other side of our brain, and when we started using the other side of our brain, the men started, like tearing apart the female gods and making them, mountains or mounds of different parts. It's fascinating, fascinating read. And it makes sense because when you start using the other side of your brain, your rational, and the rational side, that's the left brain, is what we really, really love here in America. We don't really look at the right side of the brain, which is, the spacious, artsy, everything, anything is possible. And that's what we want to try to access when we meditate,
Mm,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
Because we get all the possibility for anything. That's why at the end of a yoga session, Savasana is so great.
Well, it
It's
just
like I
brings
can do
things
anything.
up. It allows us
Yeah.
to access our prefrontal cortex, which is where all the
Yeah.
creativity, rational thought, strategic thinking, and things come up. Things come
Yeah.
up all the time, which is amazing. But here's the opportunity and the gift in menopause in amidst all of the, it actually is the beginning. It can be the beginning if we think about things that way.
Mhm.
Look, the children are usually older by that time, so it leaves us and our careers or our businesses and our partnerships there. It's at a different stage. It's a more settled stage in life at some point, so in some aspects. So it's actually a chance, a freedom. We have freedom to explore, we have freedom to give back to ourselves, we have freedom to be curious and to learn again, and to embrace our independence. And again, it does go back to where we placed our identity and value. I know there's a lot of women who maybe put all of their focus on their children growing up. So the empty
Yeah.
nesters, when their children leave, you're there with a partner maybe you haven't had a deep connection with for many years, or, and it's terrifying. And there's such a sense of loss and sadness and loss of identity, loss of relevancy. I'm not important anymore. I've lost my purpose. But here's a
Yeah.
chance. Yes, sit in that loss and feel that sadness and feel those, the passing of the years, of course, that, and celebrate as well all of those beautiful memories. But also look at the future as an adventure, as, and there are all kinds of questions now we can, this is the freedom really to ask ourselves, what kind of woman do I want to be? What kind of partner do I want to be? What kind of leader do I want to be? And what am I passionate about? What am I curious about? What do I want to learn? And here you have all the opportunity and the time to do so now.
That's
And
true. That's true. I
there's
mean,
a
for the
gift.
most part, people do. One of
Hmm.
my favorite questions every single time there's any sort of event ever is,
Hmm.
what is the opportunity in this?
Yes, beautiful.
What is the
I love
opportunity in
that. And
this?
your earlier question as well about what makes my heart sing, it's what brings
Mm,
me joy. Does this feel like love? Everything can be boiled. I
yeah.
even ask myself that question in business
You have
with
to.
certain relationships. Does this feel like love, or is this violating all kinds of boundaries? So that's such a relevant, it boils all, we can put all kinds of frameworks, very complicated, very strategic, but ultimately that's the question. Does it feel like love? Does this bring me joy?
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
in a
Does it?
business relationship, even in
Sure.
business negotiations, even in business relationships. So this is
Yeah.
such
No,
an
I
important
mean,
question.
one of the things that I think that, my biggest breakthrough was
Hmm.
truly developing a spiritual practice and
Hmm.
allowing myself to realize that there is something more. I mean, I remember when I was working with a stylist in New York, and I said, we were like shopping for, I don't know what it was, shopping for clothes or something, and I said, well, you know what happens when we die? And she's like, nothing. And I said, yep, nothing. And that was and that was 5 years ago or something, and I truly believe that. I believe that. And now my feeling is that we are truly part of something more, and the only reason I believe that is because the evidence for me is showing that as I have developed my spiritual practice, my life has, everything I've wanted has come to me.
Hmm.
And other things, but it's just like, all my relationships are improving and all of my goals are coming true, and I'm having to think bigger every single day. It has to be bigger and bigger and bigger because I'm reaching all the goals that I have set for myself. And I do believe that it's a spiritual practice that made that happen for me. A
And
consistent
so
spiritual
happy for
practice.
you. And so happy to hear that. I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. It all starts inside. It all
Yeah.
starts with us. And when we change and shift and evolve, so does our outside world. Our outside world is always a reflection of who we are inside, who we think we are inside, our
That's true.
beliefs. So if we think we're unworthy, if we don't think we deserve, if we think all of these fear-based mindset instead of abundance mindset, of course our
Yeah.
reality is going to, it is true that what you do, be careful of what you think, because it does manifest itself, not in a fear-based way. So there's so much power in that. If we shift our mindset, I know you said to be careful of that word, but I think some questions that we ask also that are important has to do with finding out what our core values are, what's really
Hmm.
important to us. And our lives are our thoughts, intentions, words, actions, things that we say and do on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week, month-to-month, which turns into years. Is that reflective of who we really, what's really important to us? Or are we a little bit on autopilot? So these are always good take stock, step back moments where we can ask ourselves these questions to ensure that we are living lives, that we are behaving in a way, that we are speaking, we are conducting ourselves, and that we are living a life that's in full alignment with what our values are, with what's important to us. Because that's where the joy and fulfillment and happiness comes from, that integration instead of a disconnection and a misalignment, which causes all sorts of disease, physically and mentally, and discomfort.
There's something about figuring out your core values. Mm-hmm. Do you have an exercise that you walk people through for that?
In core values, what's really important to them? It's a series of different things. So it's really I've never been so unclear in terms of my own core values, even though it's been cloudy. So it's something that I've been quite clear about. But I think starting off with what am I passionate about and what brings me joy is a good starting point. So that's kind of a journaling exercise. What am I passionate about? What brings me joy? And then the second question I would ask is, where do I feel in lack? That's a really big one for people. And this lack manifests itself in fear and anger, in a different way of looking at things that is really all about limiting beliefs. So where do I feel in lack? Whether that's, do I feel like I'm lacking support? Do I feel like I'm lacking a loving partner? Do I feel like I'm lacking respect? Yes. What's missing from my life that in my heart I really, really want? If no one, just in total secrecy, in total privacy, writing that all down without fear of judgment, not even from yourself, just being 1000% honest. Where do I feel in lack? Where are my needs not being met? And where can I meet them? Those are good starting points. And then really looking at what's important to you. I mean, look at these words. What do they mean to people? For me personally, integrity, loyalty, compassion, truth. And take a step back, look at your triggers. When do you get most upset by things? That will give you a very good indication also of not where the parts of you, of course, also where the parts of you need to be healed and where you feel in need that need to be met, but what's really important to you. So for me, integrity, of course, is pretty much almost number one. And it's because I can't bear it when people lie. I would always 1000% rather hear the truth, no matter how ugly and how messy and how horrible it is. Tell me the truth, then we can deal with it. We can fix it. We can move past it. Not like we put all the broken pieces together, but let's just be honest. And when you're having that heart to heart, totally open, genuine, authentic connection, there's not one thing that cannot be overcome, no matter how hideous. And believe me, I have I have seen the gamut of things and experiences, and there's not one thing that can't be done. So really, in terms of an exercise to unpack what's really important to people, maybe just thinking about what are those times where I was really hurt, those times where I was really angry or really scared, and thinking back to what that means for them. That is a way of finding out what our values are. I hope that makes sense.
And well, no, it does. And I mean, I think that's really, really great. And, for anyone who's listening, if you're the type of person who really wants to find out what your core values are, then, maybe going back and listening to that again is going to be very helpful to you. I went through an exercise where I had to write a whole bunch of things, like different types of values on papers. And then I had to give one up until I had one left.
Tough. Okay.
And my number one core value was spirituality, and my number two was wealth. And wealth was more along the lines of legacy, because I have a special needs child. So I want to make sure that he'll never have to, worry for anything.
You don't even need to justify that. It's okay. People have this fear of money. If you have money as a value, or financial stability and wealth as a value, we have this fear that, that makes me sound so greedy. That makes me sound... No, it doesn't. Money is an energy. It's a resource. It's an exchange. We need it to live life. We need it to give. It's a transaction. And when we give it, when we pay it out to a supplier, anything, then it's energy that moves on and on and on and goes on to nurture people. So let's all agree to move past the money shame relationship.
Money shame is really something. I mean, that keeps us poor. And it took me, when I finally gave myself permission to earn money as a doctor, I started making a lot of money, and I was able to put a lot of money away, and I was pretty happy with that. And then it just stopped serving me, and then COVID hit, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so, so I really, really put all my eggs into, helping women discover their true nature and who they really are. And there's nothing better. I mean,
beautiful.
I come up from my coaching calls. I'm like, yeah, I just really love it. So it brings me a lot of joy.
So that's you living your life of alignment there, and purpose and fullness. So that's beautiful.
True. Yeah. And it's funny because I've had this block toward the Abraham Hicks people. Just there's a few, I don't want to go into the story that I created around it, but at the end of the day, I decided to go back, and I do a lot of audiobooks and re-listen to the Vortex. And I just said, okay, I'm going to just start again without my judgment. And there's something that she says there in the Vortex as she's channeling Abraham, and she says, your emotions are your guide to help you decide what to do next. And I'd never really heard that before. I mean, I heard James Wedmore talk about it, but I never really heard her say it in that way. And I never really understood emotions, because we're never taught about emotions. We're not taught what they're there for. We just have them, and we're supposed to manage them. And it was really, this happened last night. So I was like, I think what happens is that we never, even we hit menopause, or, we hit adulthood, and we don't know how to manage our emotions. And sometimes, people will still kick and scream on the floor, like a teenager, or like a toddler, because they don't know
their
anything
inner
different.
Child.
Right. But they don't know anything different. That's how they, get their way.
Right.
And, lots of people tend to still tantrum, but at the end of the day, what is the emotion, and what is that emotion trying to guide you to? And when you can look at it as an adult, it's very different.
Very different and very empowering. That emotion, listening to our emotions, that's exactly what is the unanswered need. What need is not being met? And that is real inner child work, which is, again, best done with a therapist. But once you get started and really comfortable with essentially having your adult self having a conversation with your child self inside, like, it's not your adult self, however old we are, having a tantrum or lashing out or projecting anger. And when we are hurt, that's when it really comes up. What's when it really manifests. And let's take a step back. What is that hurt? What is that sadness? What is that anger telling me? It's, where am I not being met? What need is not being met? How can I meet this need myself as a fully functioning, fully capable adult, not this little vulnerable child that I once was, looking to my parents to meet this need, looking to adults, other people to. So we stop seeking, and this is a big, big part of the spiritual journey. We stop seeking from outside ourselves, and we start meeting our own needs. And that is where the fulfillment and that full connection. It's not to say that we stop enjoying being with other people. Of course we don't. We're human beings. We love that connection. We thrive off of it. It's beautiful, beautiful. But when we have that connection, first and foremost with ourselves, then the rest of our relationships become so authentic, so full, so sort of devoid of judgment and ego and the need to push up and fight against each other. And we just soften because we're now meeting our own needs. We're now listening. So we're not tantruming on the floor or lashing out or reacting anymore. And sometimes none of us are saints. Of course, if we hit a super, super core trigger, we'll flare. But it's what we do when we feel that flare in ourselves. Do we go with it? Not recommended, because as we all know, the repairing of that is often really quite messy and painful for all parties involved. Or do we take a step back and just not react, just be still, listen, we can even excuse ourselves from the situation. That's probably the healthiest thing to do, and just say, you know what, I just need a few minutes to just sit with this, and I'll come right back to you.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just being with that emotion. Don't repress it. Don't feel bad. Don't beat yourself up. We don't need to do that. We don't need to inflict more harm on ourselves, but just sitting with it and just have a friendly conversation. Okay, what's really going on here? What do I need? What am I really upset about? What am I really hurt about? And what do I really need from this? So I think that's that journey.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned that you think that inner child work should be done with a therapist. And I
Yeah.
actually don't
Yeah.
necessarily agree with that. I think that if
Really?
we are open enough to ourselves, yeah, I mean, that's a belief, right?
But you're a deeply evolved person, Michelle. You've done the
Yeah.
work. Would you have
Yeah,
been
but I didn't. I
capable?
mean, I don't know. I do think that if you have the right kind of guide, you may or may not need a therapist, but you have the right kind of guide who's going to support you.
Guide.
You don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need a therapist. A therapist is going to have a little bit
All
more in the
right.
toolbox for you.
Let
But
me.
yeah, but there's another book that I've recently read. I read a lot called "It's Not Your Money" by
Mm-hmm.
Toshi Silver. Have you heard of that
Yes.
one?
Do you know this is the exact same person who mentioned the first book that you mentioned earlier and mentioned Toshi Silver's It's Not Your Money? Yes, yes, I read that years ago. So
Yeah, well,
funny.
I just came across it and I found it to be really, really good. And one of the exercises is to, work with your inner child in that. And I think, as long as we have a guide and we're open, I mean, we're not going to have any sort of psychotic break by looking at our unmet needs, or the inner child's unmet needs or the history, anything like that. I don't think you need a therapist. I think
When
we
I
have everything we need inside of us.
I do believe we do have everything inside of us, but we don't know what's happened sometimes in our own lives. We don't know things that have happened in people's lives. And there is some really dark
There
trauma
can be. Sure.
and abuse. I'm from that situation, and I
Me too.
did work with an inner child therapist. And then I moved on to a guide. She wasn't, and she do this type of work where we're looking at all the distortions and the fragmentations and the shadow selves, which I understood at that moment because I really felt I stood at the precipice of madness. I'm not to scare anyone. I never went to a mental hospital, but I really understood at that very point what schizophrenia means. When you look, and it was just these fragments of our souls when that come in to protect us, of course, always to protect us. It's all about self-preservation and to
Yeah.
protect that little child inside, where however they manifest themselves, whether it's the judge, of course, which is the inner critic is one huge one of
Yeah.
them, whether it's like the wild hedonist, whether it's, whatever, insert the blank. We all have these archetypes, these shadow archetypes that we distort into, and that come, you might recognize it, like sometimes in the past when I was triggered, my voice would literally change. The warrior would come out and my voice would change. It would drop about 3 octaves and I would suddenly be in warrior mode because it was suddenly stepping
Don't
up.
mess with me.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
To protect
Sure.
because it
Sure.
sensed threat. And it was like, okay, I have to be a warrior now. And there's all of that, which is because of the trauma behind all of that. I could see where, look, when someone devolves and unravels into full-blown schizophrenia and mental health issues, that's just a shadow self that has stepped up and taken over, and the higher self, the cognizant adult self, is not strong enough, it's not developed enough to take back over and to bring themselves back.
Exactly. Well, there's
So
more to it than that. I mean, I think, when we're abused as children, so I
mm-hmm,
come from there's a whole year of my life. I don't remember. I talk about this. You don't know this, but you probably haven't heard. I talk about it pretty freely. So how it changed for me was that, am I going to let that child run my life? And that
mm-hmm,
because a child doesn't have the experience to filter through. Like my 5-year-old self who said, I
for
have to be a
sure,
doctor.
for
Right. And
sure.
so I can take my adult experience and my adult knowledge and go back to those experiences and say, those are things that happened to my body because men did not have control of their sexuality. I can say that. And it's rational. And it happened, but it doesn't define who I am. It happened to my body.
Sure.
Right. And so I wouldn't let them, and so now it's good because I could take back my soul from that. And at the time I didn't have the adult way of looking through it in a filter. But now I can say, okay, it's something that happened. It happened. It made me who I am today. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? It's who I am. It's something that happened to that person. I don't have to live and look through that filter for every single experience anymore. And so, while I may be easily startled, and that may never change, I I don't look at every man as a threat anymore.
I think it's amazing and incredible that you were strong enough to reach that place. And I don't think there's a one size fits all solution.
There isn't.
It depends how people, I hope, know themselves well enough to say, you know what, I would really appreciate having a trusted, qualified guide, compassionate, who can lead me through this process. Or some people might be very, very happy to wing it and do it on their own and feel like they have enough of a background and a foundation and the tools. And there's no wrong or right answer. For me personally, I really appreciated having a guide walk me through at least the first parts. And it doesn't mean that you'll be in therapy or doing this for years or relying on this for years. I do it with myself all the time now. I have those, all right, what's going on conversations, much as I would do with my 9 or 12-year-old, because you can see so clearly when it's your children. I know you're not upset about that. And I, even as an empath, I even know what you are really upset about. So it's so much easier to do that when it's objective, when it's your child outside of you versus yourself. But I think hopefully people have enough self-awareness to know when they need help and when they can do it on their own. And I'm not in favor of those therapists, whatever you call them, a healer, a psychotherapist, I'm not in favor of those therapists who basically enjoy having the same client for 15, 20 years. My attitude is, if you have the same therapist for the 15 or 20 years, you're seeing the wrong therapist, because you would have evolved past that by now. Not that there's anything wrong with that therapist, but you would have evolved from the need to work with maybe that modality or that person, and you would have grown to something else. That's just my
I agree with you. I mean, listen, my personal experience with therapists was not, it just, I didn't find them that helpful, and I was able to go inside and get, kind of my own help.
That's beautiful.
But it took time, and it wasn't immediate at all. It's not like a Tony Robbins conference, right? It's life is not a Tony Robbins conference.
I know there's a lot of Tony Robbins fans out there, and I think it definitely serves a purpose. He has a very positive message. But for me, techniques and modalities like that have always been more of a plaster. It's the equivalent of taking a pill where you feel fabulous. It's a pump up, and then you come back. But where are the tools to apply that to your day-to-day life? How do you carry that? That's why our approach is root level up. Let's really work from the subconscious up. Let's really equip people. Those highs are fabulous, but the path and the journey, it's not possible to live life at that high. Our bodies can't sustain it. Physiologically just can't sustain it. But it's not about that. It's let's go in and let's really deal with the root, the issues that we're feeling that are manifesting themselves in repeated patterns of behavior and actions in a life that's not necessarily our healthiest version of our life. So as much as I love some of the things that Tony Robbins is about, it's a feel-good plaster for a weekend or a week, and then you go back to your normal life. And then what do you do? What tools do you have at your disposal to keep evolving, to keep growing, to keep uncovering, to keep unfolding?
That's where Living Ashram comes in, right?
Us, and we're not the only ones out there, but of course us. I actually haven't seen anyone else that's similar to us, because we have our well-being app. We actually launched our online shop on when was that? Yesterday? No, one Wednesday. Sorry, time is a blur now and lockdown. So we launched our online shop where people can just buy and they have it for life, our guided well-being practices. So it's our guided practices. We have our conscious breathing on there. We have our brand new body scan morning and evening. They're very different from any other body scan you've ever done, because it incorporates energy work in there and clearing specific to the emotions that we hold in each center, but done in a very accessible, guided, easily understandable way. And we have our forgiveness and gratitude practice there. And for that, we're doing pay what you can, because we don't want finances to ever be a barrier. So they start at £10, they go up to 25, and that's all accessible through our website. And
And what's
we
your
just
website?
really wanted, it's livingashram.com. So it's just
Living
living and
Ashram.
then
Okay.
ashram.com. And you just click on the shop icon to get there. But we
Great.
really wanted to be accessible to everyone. And it's, people learn in different ways. So we have on our resource hub of our wellbeing app, and everyone has a 1-month free trial, so people can go in, explore, see really what resonates with them. On our resource hub, we have articles, we have resources. So there's urgent helplines that you can call. There's a separate one for the US and the UK. And you can see the list of organizations on there, synopsis about each one, zero in, choose the one that resonates with you. And the free phone number is directly, you can call it directly from the app. And we were really inspired by, the World Health Organization stats on that 800,000 people every year lose their life to suicide. And that's one person every 40 seconds. We thought this was so tragic that it's by choice, not by any other reason. 800,000 lives wiped off the face of this earth. We wanted people to really know there's always someone at the end of the phone. There's someone who cares. You matter. You matter. We want you here. Like, you matter. Your life matters. You can make something, no matter how dark it seems. Just stay, take that first step. And that's where, but then we have much more cheerful things too, Michelle. Not all doom and gloom here. There's social
that's
support.
fine. I think that's great. Yeah. No, I think
There's
that's great. And I
volunteer
think that,
matching, friend matching.
People can go to livingashram.com and get involved and get your app on the App Store or on Google Play and get started. So
Definitely.
I think this is great. All right.
And it was amazing speaking to you. We didn't even cover some of what I wanted to talk about, like digging deeper and facing our fears and all of those juicy things.
Another time. We'll have you come
I
back
would
and talk
love
about
to.
facing
It
your
was
fear.
amazing.
Yeah,
and I loved hearing your stories and your experiences. And it's so beautiful to share and connect like this. So thank you.
Now, if you have questions about the topics covered in this or any other podcast, I invite you to open a conversation with me via email at info@menopausemovement.com or on Facebook Messenger through my Facebook page at Dr. Michelle Gordon. That's DrMichellellegordon. I also want to invite you to join in our next beta group. Here at the Menopause Movement, we are always trying out new methods of teaching and the best ways to get on top of your menopause symptoms. We regularly run beta test groups where we create a learning experience valued at $2,000, but at no cost to you, in exchange for feedback and testimonials. To get notified of our next beta group, simply sign up at beta.menopausemovement.com. And thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement. I appreciate you.